Hey guys, settle here. Tonight we drift into a world of silk robes, rigid hierarchies, quiet courtyards, and consequences that arrive faster than a tax collector at harvest time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we begin in feudal China. A place of poetry and punishment. Of scholars and soldiers. Of rice fields stretching farther than your patience. And a government that absolutely has paperwork for your existence. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy slowly realizing you would not survive in the past. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, steady hum. And let's gently step into a life that has already been decided for you, long before you were born. In feudal China, you don't grow up asking, "What do I want to be?" You wake up one morning and discover the answer was chosen centuries ago. Your family name determines your fate. Your village defines your ceiling. Your obedience determines whether you continue breathing comfortably. Society is arranged carefully, like a porcelain vase that looks delicate but will absolutely shatter your dreams if mishandled. At the very top sits the emperor. The son of heaven. A man whose job description includes ruling millions, maintaining cosmic balance, and making sure floods don't happen too often. Because in this system, natural disasters aren't just weather. They're political reviews. If a drought hits, maybe heaven is disappointed. If a rebellion begins, definitely heaven is disappointed. And somehow that's your problem too. Below the emperor are officials, scholar bureaucrats who passed the most stressful exam system in human history. If you were born into a farming family and thought, "Maybe I'll work hard and become important." That's adorable. The imperial examination system exists. In theory, anyone can take it. In practice, you must memorize thousands of Confucian texts, compose flawless essays, and sit for days in tiny brick cells writing until your spine questions your life choices. You study for years. Sometimes decades. You fail once. Try again next year. Fail again. Your family quietly wonders if heaven prefers your cousin. Pass. Congratulations. You are now exhausted for the rest of your life, but respectable. And respect in feudal China is oxygen. Because below scholars come farmers. Then artisans. Then merchants. Yes, merchants, the people with money, rank near the bottom. Why? Because they profit from other people's labor. Suspicious. Unsettling. Almost morally offensive. In feudal China, making money is less honorable than growing rice in waist-deep mud. So if you are wealthy but not scholarly, society nods politely while judging you. Quietly. Forever. And beneath all this are people who barely register on official scrolls. Servants. Laborers. People whose names history did not consider important enough to write down. If you are born here, your ambition is simple. Survive. Let's say you're a farmer. Because statistically, you are. You wake before sunrise. Not because you enjoy morning meditation. But because the land tax waits for no one. Your house is simple, wood, packed earth, maybe a tiled roof if your family has done reasonably well and heaven hasn't recently expressed disappointment. Breakfast. Millet porridge. Maybe rice if you're fortunate. Vegetables if the harvest was kind. Meat is rare. Meat is a rumor. Meat is something officials eat while discussing how much more grain you owe. You step into the fields. The air is damp. Your feet sink slightly into soil that does not care about your back pain. You plant. You weed. You harvest. You repeat. And every season carries tension. Too much rain. Flood. Too little rain. Drought. Locusts. Heaven frowns again. And when harvest time comes, officials arrive to collect taxes. In grain. Always grain. They measure carefully. You watch closely. Because if too much leaves your storage jars, your family eats less. If too little is handed over, you risk punishment. There is no appeal process. There is only compliance. Sometimes famine strikes. When that happens, survival becomes negotiation. Families sell valuables. Then livestock. Sometimes daughters are sent into service. Hunger does not argue. It persuades. Quietly. Relentlessly. And if bandits hear that your village had a better harvest than expected, they may visit. At night. Politely uninvited. The countryside is not lawless. It is simply, under-supervised. Perhaps you were not born a farmer. Perhaps your parents dreamed bigger. Perhaps they decided you would study. You sit cross-legged with brush and ink. You memorize Confucius. You memorize Mencius. You memorize until the words feel like part of your bloodstream. Filial piety. Loyalty. Ritual propriety. Harmony. You are taught that order is sacred. Hierarchy is natural. Questioning it is unwise. The exam system becomes your horizon. Years pass in study. You practice calligraphy until your wrist aches. Because handwriting is character. And character is destiny. When the exam day comes, you enter a small cell barely large enough to stretch your legs. You bring food. Ink. Hope. You write essays interpreting classical texts. You must demonstrate moral insight, literary elegance, and political wisdom, all without accidentally implying that current officials lack those qualities. Because satire is not rewarded. If you fail, you return home in silence. Your family says nothing. But the rice tastes slightly heavier. If you pass the lower level, you advance. If you pass the highest level, your entire lineage glows with pride. And now you serve the state. Which means paperwork. So much paperwork. Petitions. Reports. Tax records. Infrastructure planning. Disaster relief coordination. Corruption investigations. Because corruption exists. Quietly. Creatively. Human beings remain human, even in silk robes. And if you refuse a bribe, you make enemies. If you accept one, you risk execution. Balance is delicate. Like porcelain. Always porcelain. If you are a woman in feudal China, your path is narrower. Not invisible. But narrower. Your virtue defines your family's honor. Your obedience reflects your upbringing. Marriage is arranged. Not cruelly. But practically. Love is secondary. Stability is primary. You move into your husband's household. You serve his parents. Especially his mother. Which requires emotional precision and strategic humility. You manage the home. Raise children. Preferably sons. Because sons continue the ancestral line. Daughters are loved. But sons are security. In certain periods, foot binding becomes fashionable among elite families. Small feet symbolize refinement. Beauty through restriction. Pain as status. Walking becomes careful. Deliberate. Slow. Like much of life. Education for women varies by dynasty and family. Some learn poetry. Some become skilled calligraphers. Some manage estates with remarkable intelligence, quietly shaping household economics while remaining officially within the inner chambers. Power exists. But it wears softer clothing. Religion and philosophy drift through daily life. Confucianism shapes behavior. Taoism whispers about harmony with nature. Buddhism offers comfort about suffering and rebirth. Temples stand peacefully. Incense curls into the air. You bow. You hope. You ask for blessings. For rain. For sons. For health. For forgiveness. Because illness is common. Medical knowledge exists, herbal remedies, acupuncture, careful dietary balance. But epidemics still sweep through cities. And when they do, explanations blend medicine with cosmology. Heaven. Qi imbalance. Ancestral displeasure. Sometimes recovery happens. Sometimes it does not. Death is familiar. Not dramatic. Just, present. Funerals are elaborate. Ancestor worship is constant. Your family line stretches backward like an endless corridor of names. And one day, you will join them. Quietly. Respectfully. Hopefully without scandal. Travel is slow. Roads connect cities, but journeys take days or weeks. Caravans move goods, silk, tea, porcelain. The Silk Road carries ideas and commerce. But for most people, the village you are born in is the village you will die in. News travels by messenger. Imagine, for a moment, that against all statistical odds, you were not born into a farming village or a scholar's modest courtyard. Imagine you were born inside the capital. Inside walls so high and thick they seem less like architecture and more like a warning. The Forbidden City. Or whatever name it carries in this particular dynasty, the palace, the inner court, the center of everything. If you are here, your life is even less your own. Servants move silently across stone floors polished by centuries of obedience. Every step is measured. Every glance controlled. Because inside the palace, proximity to power is both privilege and hazard. The emperor rises before dawn. He does not stretch leisurely. He does not scroll through anything. He is handed memorials, written reports from officials across the empire. Flood damage in the south. Border tensions in the north. Tax discrepancies in the west. Grain shortages. Corruption accusations. Requests for promotion. Requests for punishment. He reads. Or more accurately, he endures. To rule an empire this large is to drown in paper. And somewhere in the palace corridors move the eunuchs. Men altered physically so they may serve within the inner court without threatening the imperial lineage. They control access. They carry secrets. They observe everything. Some become powerful. Very powerful. Too powerful, according to certain officials. Court politics is not loud. It is silent. It is smiles over tea. It is alliances formed through marriage. It is poems written with hidden meanings. It is a misplaced word that leads to exile. Or worse. You might imagine luxury. Silk robes. Jade ornaments. Banquets. And yes, those exist. But so does paranoia. So does constant scrutiny. If you serve in the palace, as a maid, as a guard, as a minor attendant, your survival depends on invisibility. Be helpful. Be efficient. Be forgettable. Because attention can be fatal. One rumor. One accusation. One suggestion that you overheard something you shouldn't have. And suddenly you are reassigned. Far away. Very far away. Outside the palace walls, the military trains. Feudal China is not peaceful simply because it values harmony. There are nomadic tribes along the northern borders. Rival states in earlier eras. Pirates along the coast. Rebellions that flare like dry grass in summer. If you are conscripted, you do not debate the matter. You are handed a spear. Or a bow. Or armor that fits only approximately. You march. The Great Wall stretches across mountains like a stone dragon. Impressive. Endless. Cold in winter. Merciless in wind. Soldiers stationed there endure isolation. Long nights. Sparse supplies. Letters from home that arrive months late, if at all. Military life is discipline layered over uncertainty. Battle is not cinematic. It is confusion. Dust. Noise. Fear that must be swallowed because cowardice carries consequences. And if you return home, you return changed. Quieter. Or not at all. Meanwhile, in the cities, markets buzz with life. Vendors sell tea. Spices. Cloth. Paper lanterns. Porcelain bowls thin enough to glow when held to light. Merchants negotiate carefully. They smile. They bow. They calculate. Technically ranked low in social hierarchy, merchants nonetheless understand something essential. Money moves things. Money oils bureaucracy. Money builds houses. Money funds education for sons who will someday pass exams and lift the family's status. So while Confucian ideology places scholars above merchants, reality is more flexible. Quietly flexible. A wealthy merchant family might sponsor local projects. Repair a bridge. Fund a school. Make donations to temples. Public generosity, private influence. It is a delicate dance. Because appearing too wealthy invites scrutiny. And scrutiny invites taxes. Or worse, confiscation. So prosperity must be tasteful. Understated. Like embroidered silk hidden beneath a modest outer robe. Let's return to daily life. Evenings settle softly over villages and towns. Oil lamps flicker. Families gather for simple meals. Conversations are restrained. Children are reminded of manners. Elders are respected. Filial piety is not optional. It is foundational. You kneel before ancestral tablets. Offer incense. Bow 3 times. Because honoring those who came before you ensures continuity. Identity is not individual. It is generational. You are not just yourself. You are your father's child. Your grandfather's descendant. Your future son's ancestor. Any disgrace stains backward and forward. That pressure hums constantly beneath the surface of life. Like a string pulled tight but never allowed to snap. Festivals offer relief. The Lunar New Year arrives with color and noise. Red paper decorations. Firecrackers to scare away misfortune. Dumplings shaped like silver ingots. Families reunite. Debts are settled if possible. Old grudges are softened, at least temporarily. There is laughter. Music. Lanterns drifting upward into night skies. For a moment, hierarchy relaxes. Not disappears. Just softens. Then the days resume their usual rhythm. Planting. Studying. Reporting. Obeying. You might wonder about crime. Surely people resist. Surely someone pushes back against such structure. They do. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes loudly. Bandits roam certain regions. Outlaws who reject taxation and hierarchy. Romanticized in folk tales. Feared in reality. Corruption occasionally festers within official ranks. An ambitious governor siphons funds. A magistrate accepts bribes. When discovered, punishment is severe. Public. Deterrent. Because maintaining order is sacred. The law is clear. Punishments can be harsh. Exile to distant frontiers. Forced labor. Execution. The body is not considered entirely your own. It belongs partly to your parents, who gave it to you. So damaging it intentionally is seen as disrespect. Even criminals sometimes endure punishment without outward protest. Because dignity matters. Even at the end. Education continues to shape the elite. Private academies flourish in certain eras. Students debate philosophy. Discuss ethics. Argue over interpretations of ancient texts. Ink stains their sleeves. Ambition stains their thoughts. To succeed is to rise. To fail repeatedly is to become a cautionary tale. Stories circulate of men who passed the imperial exam at 70 years old. Persistence elevated to virtue. Failure reframed as moral testing. Hope stretched thin across decades. Natural disasters remain unpredictable. Floods from the Yellow River. Earthquakes. Famine. When these occur, whispers begin. Has the emperor lost the mandate of heaven? Is it time for change? Dynasties are not eternal. They rise in strength. They decline in corruption. They fall in rebellion. History in feudal China is cyclical. Like seasons. Like planting and harvest. Like birth and death. And through it all, the average person wakes up. Works. Bows. Eats modestly. Sleeps lightly. Dreams cautiously. You might think you could handle it. You would study harder. Work longer. Speak carefully. But imagine the weight of constant awareness. Every gesture evaluated. Every relationship strategic. Every ambition filtered through family duty. There is beauty here. Refinement. Art. Poetry. Calligraphy so elegant it feels like breathing made visible. Porcelain so delicate it seems impossible. Landscapes painted in ink, mountains fading into mist. But beneath the beauty lies structure. And beneath structure lies expectation. And beneath expectation lies consequence. You would not last a day because modern comfort has taught you spontaneity. Opinion. Choice. Feudal China offers stability in exchange for surrender. Harmony in exchange for self. Security in exchange for silence. And as night deepens over tiled rooftops and distant mountains, lanterns dim one by one. Somewhere, a scholar continues studying by candlelight. Somewhere, a farmer counts remaining grain. Somewhere, an official drafts a report he hopes will not offend. Somewhere, the emperor reads one final petition before sleep. And somewhere, you realize that in this world, surviving a single day requires patience deeper than rivers and obedience stronger than walls. So breathe slowly. Because we are not finished. There are still hidden court intrigues. Secret societies. Philosophical rivalries. Trade voyages. Artisans who shaped the world with inventions you now take for granted. And rebellions that shook the heavens themselves. Imagine the lantern light growing softer. The courtyard emptying. Cricket somewhere beyond the wall. We continue. In feudal China, time does not rush. It accumulates. Dynasties rise slowly, like mist over mountains, and fall just as slowly, like stone eroding under patient rain. You live inside that slowness. Even if you never see the emperor. Even if you never travel beyond your province. The state is always there. Quiet. Watching. Recording. There is a census. There are tax records. There are grain quotas calculated with mathematical seriousness. Your existence is documented. Not for celebration. But for order. Order is sacred. Chaos is unforgivable. If bandits disrupt trade routes, officials are reprimanded. If harvest reports are inaccurate, magistrates are questioned. If rebellion sparks in one county, neighboring counties brace for inspection. Because responsibility flows downward. And blame flows upward. If you are a local magistrate, the lowest level official, you are judge, tax collector, engineer, social worker, and occasionally reluctant executioner. You mediate disputes over land boundaries. You settle arguments about irrigation canals. You listen to grievances from farmers who bow deeply while explaining that their neighbor's pig has eaten something politically inconvenient. You read legal codes thick enough to flatten hope. You try to remain incorruptible. Because corruption is punished harshly when discovered. But temptation is constant. Gifts arrive. Tokens of gratitude. A basket of fruit. A bolt of silk. A pouch that clinks softly. You must navigate this with extreme delicacy. Refuse too bluntly, and you insult. Accept too openly, and you condemn yourself. Life here is not dramatic. It is cautious. Measured. Every decision weighed like grain on a scale. And then there are the artisans. People whose hands shape the quiet beauty of civilization. Potters turning clay into porcelain thin as moonlight. Blacksmiths forging tools that must not fail in the field. Paper makers transforming pulp into the foundation of knowledge. Inventions emerge here that will one day circle the globe. Printing techniques. Gunpowder. The compass. But for the artisan, innovation is not a headline. It is survival. Your skill defines your worth. If your bowls crack in the kiln, your reputation cracks with them. If your silk weaving is uneven, merchants notice. If your carpentry fails, someone's roof collapses, and possibly your career with it. Guilds form in cities. Standards are maintained. Apprentices sweep floors for years before touching tools of importance. Mastery is earned slowly. Respect is built quietly. And even then, artisans remain beneath scholars in rank. Because knowledge of text outranks knowledge of hands. That is simply how the hierarchy breathes. Let's step briefly into a scholar's private study. Ink stone. Brushes resting neatly. Scrolls stacked in disciplined piles. Outside, bamboo rustles in the wind. Inside, the mind wrestles with philosophy. Confucianism teaches order. Taoism whispers of natural flow. Buddhism speaks of suffering and release. Intellectual life is not casual here. Debate can determine careers. Aligning yourself with the wrong interpretation of governance can mean exile. Political factions form around ideas. Reformers propose changes to tax systems. Traditionalists warn of instability. Sometimes reform succeeds. Sometimes reformers disappear. History remembers some. Forgets many. If you are thoughtful, you learn when to speak. If you are wise, you learn when not to. Because the empire tolerates reflection. But it does not tolerate chaos disguised as wisdom. Now imagine trade caravans moving westward. Camels carrying silk across deserts. Merchants exchanging goods for horses, spices, glassware. Cultural exchange hums beneath commerce. Ideas travel with goods. Religions spread along roads. Stories shift shape as they move. But for you, unless you are directly involved, this global exchange is distant. Exotic. You hear rumors of lands beyond mountains. Foreign envoys with strange clothing and stranger customs. Tribute missions arrive at court. They bow deeply. Present gifts. Acknowledge the supremacy of the emperor. Diplomacy here is ritualized performance. Ceremony layered upon ceremony. Every gesture choreographed. Even international relations must maintain harmony. Or at least the appearance of it. Rebellions do happen. When famine stretches too long. When corruption becomes unbearable. When taxes exceed tolerance. Peasant uprisings gather momentum like storms. Secret societies form. Symbols passed quietly from hand to hand. Oaths whispered at night. The mandate of heaven becomes the central argument. If heaven withdraws its favor, rebellion is justified. This is not merely political theory. It is cosmic logic. Dynasties have fallen this way before. They will fall this way again. But rebellion is dangerous. Punishments are swift and public. Families of rebels are implicated. Villages are scrutinized. If you even appear sympathetic, your life narrows rapidly. So most people endure. Because endurance is safer than revolution. Most of the time. Let's not forget childhood. Children here do not float freely through endless possibility. They are trained early. Boys practice characters with small brushes. Girls learn household management. Respect is taught before reading. Obedience before ambition. Play exists. Kites in open fields. Simple games in courtyards. But always under watchful eyes. Because your behavior reflects your family. And your family reflects generations. A careless child can embarrass an entire lineage. Pressure arrives early. Softly at first. Then more firmly. Like hands guiding your shoulders into a bow. Night deepens. City gates close. Guards patrol. Curfew in certain eras. Lanterns flicker in narrow streets. Tea houses empty slowly. Scholars debate quietly over cups of steaming leaves. Poetry is recited. Sometimes melancholic. Sometimes reflective. Because poetry is safe, mostly. It allows emotion within structure. Grief within rhyme. Longing within metaphor. Direct criticism. Less safe. Metaphor becomes shield and sword. If you are clever, you hide meaning between lines. If you are careless, someone else finds it. And reports it. You might think you could adapt. Wake early. Study hard. Speak cautiously. But imagine decades of this. Not days. Decades. Every decision filtered through hierarchy. Every hope negotiated through family duty. You cannot simply move cities. You cannot casually change careers. You cannot reinvent yourself. You belong. To a household. To a clan. To a social class. To an empire. There is comfort in that belonging. It gives identity. Continuity. But it leaves little room for escape. As the moon rises over tiled rooftops and distant mountains, incense burns in small household shrines. Someone whispers a prayer for prosperity. Someone else prays for rain. A scholar prays to pass next year's exam. A soldier prays to return home. A mother prays for her son's health. The emperor prays for heaven's continued approval. And you, if you lived here, would pray for something simple. A good harvest. A fair official. A peaceful year. Because in feudal China, survival is not about glory. It is about balance. Maintaining harmony within a structure so vast that any misstep echoes loudly. You would not last a day because you are used to freedom disguised as choice. Here, choice is disguised as duty. And duty is constant. Like the turning of seasons. Like the flow of the river. Like the brush moving steadily across paper. Slow. Controlled. Unforgiving. And still. Beautiful. Rest now. We are only halfway through the quiet weight of this world. There are still inner court rivalries. Scholar versus eunuch tensions. Frontier expansions. Cultural golden ages. And the slow unraveling of dynasties that believe themselves eternal. There are moments in feudal China when everything seems stable. The granaries are full. The borders are quiet. The emperor is young, capable, and surrounded by competent advisors. These are the golden ages. Poetry flourishes. Art reaches delicate heights. Trade expands. Cities swell with quiet confidence. If you live during one of these periods, life feels almost manageable. Markets are lively but orderly. Roads are repaired. Bridges maintained. Taxes still exist, of course they do, but they feel predictable rather than crushing. Scholars gather in gardens to compose verse. Painters retreat to mountains seeking inspiration in mist and pine. Calligraphers practice strokes that look effortless but are built on years of discipline. Culture deepens. And yet even in golden ages, the system does not relax. Hierarchy remains. Etiquette remains. Expectation remains. Because the stability itself depends on obedience. The moment people grow too comfortable, too expressive, too independent, the balance trembles. And tremors are never welcome. Inside the palace, rivalries unfold like slow chess matches. A favored consort gains influence. A prince attracts supporters. A senior official proposes reform. Another quietly opposes it. Memorials to the throne are written with careful phrasing. No one says directly what they mean. They suggest. They imply. They quote ancient texts that conveniently support their position. Because direct confrontation is dangerous. If you are aligned with the losing faction, your future narrows quickly. Demotion. Exile to a distant province. Or a polite instruction to retire permanently. So ambition must be wrapped in humility. Confidence must be disguised as service. Even success must appear reluctant. You never strive openly. You are called to responsibility. You never desire power. You accept it reluctantly for the good of the empire. Performance is constant. Even sincerity is strategic. Let's step far from the capital now. To the frontier regions. Mountains rugged and cold. Grasslands wide and exposed. Here, the empire feels thinner. Less certain. Soldiers guard passes. Signal fires stand ready along ridgelines. Watchtowers break the horizon. Life here is harsher. Supply lines stretch long and fragile. Winters bite harder. Isolation settles deeper. If you are stationed here, your loyalty is tested not by politics, but by endurance. You miss home. Miss family. Miss the rhythm of familiar streets. Letters arrive slowly. Sometimes never. And yet your duty remains. Guard the border. Maintain order. Represent the empire. Because the empire must appear strong at its edges. Even when it feels tired at its center. Back in the villages, time continues its quiet cycle. Planting. Harvest. Storage. Repair. Children grow. Elders fade. Ancestral tablets accumulate more names. Respect for elders is absolute. Age is authority. Experience is weight. You do not contradict your grandparents. Even if you quietly suspect they are wrong. Because social harmony outweighs individual accuracy. You swallow correction. You practice patience. You learn that peace in the household is worth more than winning an argument. This lesson repeats across society. Harmony over ego. Structure over spontaneity. Collective over individual. To live here is to constantly measure yourself against others. Am I respectful enough? Quiet enough? Diligent enough? Loyal enough? Because falling short is not just personal failure. It is family failure. Lineage failure. History failure. And history here is long. Very long. Long enough to make your single lifetime feel like a footnote. Technology evolves quietly. Water clocks measure time. Mechanical devices emerge in certain dynasties. Agricultural improvements increase yields. Iron tools replace older implements. But progress does not disrupt hierarchy. Innovation is absorbed into the structure, not used to dismantle it. Even printing, which spreads knowledge more widely, reinforces classical texts. It helps students memorize faster. Helps officials distribute edicts more efficiently. It strengthens the system. It does not free you from it. Because the system is flexible. But only in ways that preserve itself. As centuries pass, cracks begin to show. Court factions deepen. External threats increase. Economic strain tightens. Perhaps silver flows in unevenly. Perhaps trade imbalances shift stability. Perhaps natural disasters multiply. The mandate of heaven begins to feel uncertain. Rumors travel. Whispers grow louder. Officials argue more sharply. Reforms proposed. Blocked. Proposed again. Blocked again. You, the ordinary person, feel this not through philosophy, but through scarcity. Taxes increase. Grain shipments diverted. Military drafts expand. Bandit activity rises. And once again, survival becomes negotiation. History tightens around you like a belt pulled one notch further. And yet, through all of it, beauty persists. Lantern festivals glow against dark skies. Children chase drifting lights. Poets write verses about falling leaves. Tea masters refine rituals into quiet meditation. Garden designers shape landscapes meant to mirror mountains in miniature. Art becomes refuge. Structure becomes comfort. Ritual becomes anchor. Because when life is rigid, ritual offers meaning. When choice is limited, beauty becomes resistance. A brushstroke. A melody on a guccine. Steam rising from a simple cup of tea. These are small freedoms. Contained. Acceptable. Safe. You would not last a day here because you are used to immediacy. To speaking your thoughts. To questioning openly. To moving cities if dissatisfied. To reinventing yourself without permission. Here, reinvention requires approval. Movement requires documentation. Speech requires calculation. Ambition requires disguise. Even grief must be expressed properly. There are mourning periods. Correct clothing. Correct rituals. Sorrow structured by expectation. Even emotion answers to etiquette. And yet, there is something steady about this world. Something rooted. You belong somewhere. Unquestionably. You know your place. You know your duties. You know what tomorrow will likely demand. There is comfort in predictability. Even when it confines you. Perhaps that is the quiet paradox. You might not last because the boundaries feel suffocating. But those boundaries also create continuity. Generations woven together like silk threads. Strong. Interdependent. Fragile if pulled too sharply. The night grows deeper now. The empire sleeps. In farmhouses. In city apartments above shops. In barracks along distant walls. In palace chambers behind guarded gates. Scrolls rest. Brushes dry. Fields wait for dawn. And somewhere, a scholar still studies by fading candlelight. Because next year's exam may be his only chance. And hope, even in rigid systems, refuses to disappear. So breathe slowly. Let the centuries drift past you. Let the weight of hierarchy settle gently instead of heavily. We are nearing the final stretches of this long endurance. Where dynasties finally fracture. Where old structures bend too far. And where the world you've grown used to begins to change in ways no one fully controls. The candle is nearly finished. The empire is older now. And you can feel it. No dynasty believes it will fall. Every ruling house assumes permanence. They speak of eternity. Of divine favor. Of heaven's unwavering approval. But time is patient. And time erodes everything. In the later years of a dynasty, the signs are subtle at first. Appointments feel less merit-based. More familial. Court factions sharpen. Eunuchs and scholar officials clash more openly. Memorials to the throne grow bolder, or more desperate. The emperor may be strong. Or perhaps young. Or perhaps uninterested. Sometimes a ruler retreats into art, pleasure, or isolation. And when the center weakens, the edges strain. Governors act with more independence. Military commanders grow ambitious. Taxes increase to fund campaigns meant to restore control. The people feel it long before the historians write about it. Grain becomes scarce. Bandit groups swell with desperate farmers. Secret societies whisper louder. The mandate of heaven, once stable, begins to flicker. Floods devastate regions. Drought grips others. Earthquakes shake cities already tense. And every disaster becomes political. Heaven is displeased, people murmur. Because in this world, nature is never just nature. It is commentary. If you are a farmer now, your life becomes sharper. Less predictable. You hide small portions of grain if you can. Quietly. Carefully. Because official quotas rarely shrink when harvests do. You hear rumors of rebellion in neighboring provinces. You hear that soldiers are coming. You hear that rebels are coming. Neither option feels comforting. You keep your head down. Because survival is still the only ambition that feels realistic. If rebels arrive and demand support, you nod. If imperial troops arrive and demand loyalty, you nod again. You survive by bending. Not breaking. In the cities, scholars feel the tension differently. They debate whether reform could save the dynasty. Some advocate tax restructuring. Land redistribution. Stronger oversight of corrupt officials. Others insist tradition must remain untouched. To change too much is to destabilize further. Petitions fly back and forth. Some reforms pass. Some stall. Some reformers are punished for daring to imply that the system needs improvement. Because suggesting weakness is sometimes treated as betrayal. Even when it is meant as rescue. You might be a minor official watching this unfold. You understand the cracks. You see inefficiencies. You want stability. But you also want survival. And aligning yourself with the wrong reformist movement could end your career. Or your life. So you choose caution. Caution is rarely heroic. But it is often effective. And then, inevitably, rebellion consolidates. It gains a leader. A charismatic figure claiming heaven's support. Promising fairness. Promising relief. Promising a new beginning. The promise of reset is powerful. Peasants join. Disillusioned soldiers defect. Local officials either resist or quietly switch allegiance. Battles erupt. Cities fall. Fortifications tested. Smoke rises over landscapes that once felt eternal. The old dynasty fights to maintain legitimacy. Because in this world, nature is never just nature. It is commentary. If you are a farmer now, your life becomes sharper. Less predictable. You hide small portions of grain if you can. Quietly. Carefully. Because official quotas rarely shrink when harvests do. You hear rumors of rebellion in neighboring provinces. You hear that soldiers are coming. You hear that rebels are coming. Neither option feels comforting. You keep your head down. Because survival is still the only ambition that feels realistic. If rebels arrive and demand support, you nod. If imperial troops arrive and demand loyalty, you nod again. You survive by bending, not breaking. In the cities, scholars feel the tension differently. They debate whether reform could save the dynasty. Some advocate tax restructuring, land redistribution, stronger oversight of corrupt officials. Others insist tradition must remain untouched. To change too much is to destabilize further. Petitions fly back and forth. Some reforms pass. Some stall. Some reformers are punished for daring to imply that the system needs improvement. Because suggesting weakness is sometimes treated as betrayal, even when it is meant as rescue. You might be a minor official watching this unfold. You understand the cracks. You see inefficiencies. You want stability. But you also want survival. And aligning yourself with the wrong reformist movement could end your career. Or your life. So you choose caution. Caution is rarely heroic. But it is often effective. And then, inevitably, rebellion consolidates. It gains a leader. A charismatic figure claiming heaven's support. Promising fairness. Promising relief. Promising a new beginning. The promise of reset is powerful. Peasants join. Disillusioned soldiers defect. Local officials either resist or quietly switch allegiance. Battles erupt. Cities fall. Fortifications tested. Smoke rises over landscapes that once felt eternal. The old dynasty fights to maintain legitimacy. Declares rebels illegitimate. Punishes dissent harshly. But once the mandate narrative shifts in enough minds, momentum builds. And eventually, the dynasty collapses. The palace is breached. Or surrendered. Or abandoned. A new banner rises. A new name declared. A new emperor proclaimed. Heaven's mandate reassigned. And for a moment, there is hope. Relief. A sense that perhaps the suffering will ease. But here is the quiet truth. For you, the farmer, the artisan, the minor clerk, daily life does not transform overnight. Yes, officials are replaced. Yes, new policies are announced. Yes, new uniforms appear. But fields still require planting. Taxes still require payment. Hierarchy still structures society. A new dynasty promises virtue. Promises anti-corruption. Promises harmony restored. And perhaps, for a while, it delivers. Golden age follows chaos. Stability returns. Poetry flourishes again. Trade expands. Art deepens. The cycle resets. Rise. Flourish. Strain. Decline. Collapse. Renewal. Over centuries, the pattern becomes almost soothing in its predictability. Nothing is permanent. Except the structure of expectation itself. And through it all, you remain small within something vast. Your name unlikely to appear in official histories. Your struggles condensed into statistics about harvest yields or population shifts. Yet your life is not meaningless. It is simply quiet. You maintain the system through obedience. Through endurance. Through repetition. You bow when required. Work when required. Mourn when required. Celebrate when permitted. You adapt. Because adaptability is survival. And survival is success. Now imagine living your entire life within this rhythm. No modern mobility. No instant communication. No radical reinvention. Your identity anchored in ancestry. Your morality shaped by classical texts written centuries before you were born. Your future bounded by family, class, geography. There is safety here. Predictability. Belonging. But there is also weight. Constant, gentle weight. The weight of duty. The weight of reputation. The weight of harmony that must never fracture because your pride demanded expression. You would not last a day not because you are weak, but because you are unused to surrendering so much autonomy. Unused to measuring every word. Unused to living as one thread in a tapestry that values the pattern more than the strand. The empire breathes one more time. Lanterns flicker across rooftops. River currents carry reflections of moonlight. An official seals a report. A farmer stacks firewood for morning. A scholar closes a scroll. A mother checks on her sleeping child. The emperor, whether wise or flawed, rests beneath carved beams painted with dragons. And history turns again. Slowly. Patiently. Without asking your permission. So now, as the night deepens around you, in your own time, in your own world, let the rigid walls of feudal China fade into mist. Let the weight of hierarchy dissolve. Let the expectations drift away like incense smoke. You have survived this journey. More than a day. Through dynasties. Through reforms. Through rebellion and renewal. And you did it comfortably. Without bowing once. Without memorizing a single Confucian text. Without paying grain taxes. Which, if we are honest, already proves you would not have lasted very long at all. Rest now. The empire sleeps. Let the silence stretch. Let the centuries keep moving. Because even when a dynasty ends, life does not. After the dust of rebellion settles. After banners are replaced and official seals recarved. There is always a period of adjustment. New laws are announced. Old loyalties are tested. Former officials scramble to prove they were never truly committed to the previous regime. Records are reviewed. Archives reorganized. Histories rewritten, gently, carefully, to explain why this new dynasty is heaven's rightful choice. Because legitimacy must be narrated. It is not enough to win. You must explain why the victory was inevitable. If you are a scholar, this is your moment of caution. The classics remain the same. Confucius does not change. But interpretations shift subtly to align with the new order. Passages once emphasized may now be downplayed. Certain phrases acquire fresh relevance. Your essays must reflect the present wind without appearing opportunistic. Adaptation becomes intellectual survival. For farmers, the changes are simpler. A new tax rate. A new local magistrate. Perhaps a temporary reduction to stabilize loyalty. Perhaps not. You listen to announcements in the village square. You bow. You return to the fields. Because regardless of the emperor's name, rice still demands planting. Rain still determines fortune. Your survival still depends on weather and policy in equal measure. You measure stability not in ideology, but in how much grain remains after tax collection. If your storage jars are fuller than last year, you approve quietly. If they are emptier, you do not protest loudly. You endure. Endurance has always been your inheritance. In cities, commerce resumes its rhythm. Merchants adjust to new official stamps. New trade permissions. New tariffs. Silk still moves along trade routes. Tea still travels to distant markets. Porcelain kills fire again. Artisans return to their craft. Because even revolutions require bowls. Even rebellions need shoes. Civilization continues through practicality. And over time, memories soften. The brutality of the fallen dynasty becomes exaggerated in storytelling. The virtue of the new dynasty becomes polished. Children grow up knowing only the current emperor's reign. For them, this structure feels eternal. Just as it did for their grandparents under a different banner. History is both dramatic and repetitive. Grand in scale. Predictable in pattern. Let's slow even further. Step away from politics. Step into a quiet countryside morning. Mist drapes low over fields. A wooden cart creaks along a dirt path. A rooster announces the obvious. You rise before the sun clears the hills. You wash your face in cool water. You tie your hair neatly. You step outside and feel earth beneath your feet. In that moment, empire feels distant. Hierarchy abstract. What matters is soil. Season. Strength. You work steadily. Your motions practiced. Repetitive. Almost meditative. Plant. Press. Lift. Carry. Stack. The rhythm becomes a kind of quiet philosophy. You may never write poetry. But your life has its own structure. Its own pattern. And there is dignity in that. Even if the world does not record it. Now imagine the scholar again. Older now. Perhaps he passed the examination after years of effort. Perhaps he did not. If he passed, he served somewhere far from home. Managing disputes. Reviewing tax registers. Trying to maintain fairness within limits imposed by higher authorities. He knows he cannot fix everything. But he can soften edges. Delay harsh penalties. Recommend modest relief. Sometimes that is enough. If he did not pass, he may teach children in his village. Respected locally. Quoting classics beneath a modest roof. His ambition redirected. Not extinguished. Life here rarely offers dramatic redemption arcs. It offers adjustment. Acceptance. Gradual compromise between expectation and reality. Even the emperor ages. No one escapes that. A young ruler once energetic becomes cautious. Perhaps weary. Perhaps ill. Succession becomes the next tension. Princes raised within luxury now maneuver for influence. Court alliances realign. The future trembles quietly behind ceremonial smiles. And the cycle prepares itself again. Because nothing in this system is static. It is rigid, yes. But it is also cyclical. Flexible in collapse. Predictable in renewal. You would not last a day because modern life has trained you to expect acceleration. Immediate feedback. Direct expression. Here, patience is survival. Indirect speech is safety. Delay is strategy. If someone insults you, you do not react instantly. You absorb. Interpret. Respond later, perhaps through a third party. If you disagree with authority, you frame your concern as loyalty. You bow before you speak. You bow after you speak. You bow even when no one is watching. Because posture reflects inner order. And inner order reflects cosmic harmony. At least, that is the expectation. Yet within all this structure, humanity persists. People fall in love, even if marriages are arranged. Parents worry. Friends laugh quietly in tea houses. Children chase each other in dusty courtyards. Someone tells a joke just bold enough to be funny but not bold enough to be dangerous. Life squeezes warmth into narrow spaces. And that warmth keeps the system from feeling entirely cold. As we drift toward the final edges of this long journey. Notice something. Feudal China is not simply oppressive. It is not simply beautiful. It is both. It is discipline and art. Restriction and refinement. Hierarchy and harmony. It demands obedience. But it also offers belonging. It limits autonomy. But it provides continuity. You would struggle here. Because your instincts lean toward self-expression. Toward choice. Toward mobility. Here, identity is inherited. Duty is constant. Freedom exists in small, contained forms, in brushstrokes, in garden paths, in poetry lines that hint without declaring. And that quiet containment defines the world. Now the empire truly sleeps. No banners changing tonight. No rebellions forming at this hour. Just the steady breath of millions resting within walls of wood and stone. The river flows without concern for dynasties. Mountains stand indifferent to emperors. The moon rises and sets without consulting the mandate of heaven. And you? You are outside it all. Observing safely. No tax collector at your door. No examination cell waiting for you. No court faction tracking your loyalties. Just quiet. Soft. Modern quiet. Let that contrast settle gently. Because the past is heavy. But it is also distant. And tonight, you have wandered through centuries. And returned untouched. Rest now. Feudal China fades into mist. The lanterns dim. The scrolls close. And history continues its slow, patient turning, without requiring you to bow. Let's drift even deeper, past the noise of courts and rebellions, past the banners and official seals, into the quieter truths that rarely make it into grand histories. Because empires are not only built on power. They are built on routine. Somewhere in a modest home, long before sunrise, a mother is already awake. She moves quietly so she does not disturb the rest of the household. She checks the embers in the stove. Adds a little fuel. Prepares simple porridge. Her life will never be written in records. No examination essays will analyze her virtue. No official will document her labor. And yet without her, without millions like her, the empire would collapse in a single generation. Feudal China depends on invisible stability. On predictable mornings. On meals prepared without complaint. On clothes mended carefully by lamplight. Duty here is not loud. It is constant. Elsewhere, a village elder sits outside beneath a tree that has stood longer than anyone alive. He remembers 3 magistrates. 2 floods. 1 famine. He has watched children grow into parents. Parents into ancestors. He knows the cycles. He has learned that panic solves little. He has learned that survival requires patience. You might find his acceptance frustrating. Why doesn't he demand change? Why doesn't he challenge injustice? But he has seen dynasties rise and fall. He knows that anger burns quickly. Structure endures. So he advises moderation. Compromise. Endurance. Not because he loves the system. But because he understands it. And understanding often looks like resignation from the outside. In a distant town, a young student practices calligraphy by dim light. His fingers ache. Ink stains his sleeve. He copies the same passage again and again. He dreams of passing the imperial exam. Dreams of lifting his family's status. Dreams of proving that effort can overcome birth. And perhaps, if he is brilliant enough, disciplined enough, fortunate enough, it will. But the exam is merciless. Thousands compete. Few succeed. His hope is admirable. But statistically fragile. Still, he writes. Because in feudal China, hope wears the shape of perseverance. In the marketplace, 2 merchants negotiate over tea leaves. Their conversation is polite. Layered with courtesy. But beneath the bows and careful phrasing is sharp calculation. Margins matter. Supplies fluctuate. Transport is risky. Bandits still exist in certain corridors. Profit is never guaranteed. And though merchants rank low in moral hierarchy, they understand something deeply practical. Without trade, cities starve. Without commerce, tax revenue dries up. Without goods, even scholars lack paper. They may not receive philosophical respect. But they are necessary. And necessity grants quiet influence. Far beyond city walls, a soldier stands watch at a remote outpost. The wind is sharp. The night cold. He thinks about home. About the fields he left behind. About parents growing older without him. He serves because duty demanded it. Because conscription allowed no debate. Because refusal would have dishonored his family. He does not feel like a symbol of imperial strength. He feels tired. Yet he remains at his post. Because if he abandons it, consequences ripple outward. And responsibility, once internalized, becomes heavier than chains. And now imagine all of them at once. The mother. The elder. The student. The merchant. The soldier. None of them control the empire. None of them shape grand policy. Yet together, they sustain it. Feudal China is not held together solely by emperors. None of them shape grand policy. Yet together, they sustain it. Feudal China is not held together solely by emperors. It is held together by compliance. By ritual. By shared belief in order. By acceptance that one's role, however small, matters in maintaining harmony. And that belief is powerful. Because when enough people believe in structure, structure becomes reality. You would not last a day because modern life has loosened those bonds. You question authority instinctively. You expect upward mobility as a right, not a miracle. You assume personal happiness deserves priority. In feudal China, happiness is secondary to stability. Individual desire is secondary to collective continuity. Your comfort is not the system's goal. Its survival is. And that changes everything. As centuries pass, slowly, quietly, the outside world begins to shift. Foreign ships appear more frequently along coasts. Strange technologies. Different ideas about governance. Different beliefs about trade. At first, these encounters are distant. Curiosities. Then they grow more consequential. Pressure from outside meets rigidity inside. And tension builds. But that is another long story. Because for most of feudal China's existence, the world felt self-contained. Complete. Sufficient. A civilization confident in its continuity. Certain of its place at the center of things. That confidence shaped everything. From architecture to etiquette. From education to execution. From poetry to punishment. And now, as we reach the furthest quiet edges of this long journey, notice how little drama defined daily life. History books focus on wars. On rebellions. On emperors. But most people woke up. Worked. Ate modestly. Spoke carefully. Honored ancestors. Slept. And repeated the cycle. The drama was structural, not constant. The pressure was ambient, not explosive. It was a world of long endurance rather than daily chaos. And that endurance required a temperament most modern people have never practiced. Patience without immediate reward. Obedience without constant explanation. Acceptance without personal branding. You would not last a day because you are accustomed to choice. Here, choice exists, but within invisible boundaries. You may choose how diligently you work. How respectfully you bow. How carefully you phrase disagreement. But you may not choose your class. Your family. Your obligations. Those are inherited. And inheritance is destiny more often than not. The lanterns are fully dim now. The empire rests. Its walls quiet. Its rivers steady. Its mountains unchanged. Generations have passed. Names added to ancestral tablets. New rulers crowned. Old rulers forgotten. Yet the rhythm remains. Slow. Measured. Unyielding. And strangely beautiful in its consistency. You have walked through it all without kneeling once. Without memorizing thousands of characters. Without fearing a misplaced word. without paying grain in tax. Which means, you have already proven something. You belong to a different world. One built on different assumptions. Different freedoms. Different pressures. And tonight, you can appreciate the weight of the past. Without carrying it. So let the tiled rooftops fade into darkness. Let the brush strokes dissolve into mist. Let the dynasties blur into memory. Feudal China sleeps. Somewhere inside the imperial capital, long after court officials have withdrawn and corridors stand empty, a single lamp still burns. A junior clerk reviews tax records. Columns of numbers. Tallies of grain. Transport logs from distant provinces. He does not question why the system demands such precision. He understands only that mistakes bring punishment. Accuracy brings survival. He rubs tired eyes and continues counting. Empires do not endure on glory. They endure on administration. On ink. On records. On quiet men who ensure that what is owed is measured exactly. Without them, no army marches. Another matter to monitor. The empire's size creates distance. Distance creates delay. Delay softens reaction. Crisis is absorbed rather than broadcast instantly. There are no urgent notifications. No flashing alerts. Information moves at the pace of horses and boats. Which means emotion moves slowly too. Perhaps that slowness is a kind of protection. You, accustomed to immediacy, would find this pace unbearable. Waiting weeks for news. Months for decisions. Years for advancement. Your world rewards speed. This one rewards endurance. Your world celebrates disruption. This one mistrusts it. You seek transformation. They seek balance. And balance, though less exciting, often lasts longer. Time passes differently here. Not in headlines. But in harvest cycles. In exam seasons. In reign titles. Children grow into adults beneath the same philosophies that shaped their grandparents. Change does occur, but gradually. Almost imperceptibly. Like a river wearing down stone. You might not notice it while living inside it. Only later, in reflection. And yet, beneath all this stability, human emotion remains unchanged. A parent still worries. A child still rebels quietly. A scholar still feels envy. A merchant still fears loss. A soldier still misses home. Systems shape behavior. They do not erase feeling. So even in a rigid hierarchy, private hearts beat with complexity. Some dream of distant provinces. Some dream of wealth. Some dream simply of rest. Most dreams remain unspoken. Because dreams, like ink, must be used carefully. Now the sky lightens slightly at the horizon. Night is thinning. Soon roosters will announce morning. Fires will be relit. Markets reopened. Lessons resumed. Bows exchanged. Orders followed. Complaints swallowed. And the vast machinery of civilization will begin its daily movement once more. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But inevitably. You have walked through emperors' halls, village fields, border posts, ancestral temples, and silent offices. You have felt the weight of expectation. The quiet pressure of conformity. The comfort of ritual. The burden of obligation. And perhaps you understand now why survival here required something different from modern resilience. Not boldness. Not constant reinvention. But steadiness. Predictability. Patience. You would not last a day, not because you are weak. But because you are shaped by a world that prizes autonomy. And this one prizes alignment. Different virtues. Different strengths. Different costs. The sun finally breaks over tiled rooftops. Golden light touches red pillars. Dust motes glow in the air. A new day begins, identical to countless others. And that sameness is the secret. Civilizations endure not through constant drama, but through repeated normalcy. Through millions of ordinary mornings. Through countless unnoticed acts of duty. That is the true architecture of feudal China. Not only walls and palaces, but habits, beliefs, expectations. Repeated until they become invisible. And now, as morning arrives fully, our long vigil ends. The empire continues without us. It does not require our presence to function. It never did. We were only observers. Guests in another era. Allowed to witness the rhythm. Allowed to feel its weight. But never bound by its rules. The roosters call. The gates open. The brushes dip into ink once more. And history resumes its slow, deliberate breath. History breathes in. History breathes out. And no single person feels the entire inhale. Mid-morning settles over the capital. Vendors lift wooden shutters. Steam rises from bamboo baskets. Tea is poured in careful arcs from clay pots. Conversations begin softly, never too loudly, because even casual speech has edges. A misplaced joke. A careless political remark. An overheard complaint. Words travel. Reputation travels faster. So language becomes measured. Polished. Indirect. You learn to say much by saying little. In this world, subtlety is protection. Inside a school courtyard, boys recite classical texts in unison. Their voices overlap like wind through reeds. They sway slightly as they memorize passages written centuries earlier. The words are not theirs. But they must carry them. To master the classics is not merely academic. It is moral alignment. To quote properly is to signal belonging. To interpret correctly is to show discipline. Originality is secondary. Harmony with tradition is primary. You might feel stifled. They feel anchored. In a modest administrative building far from the capital, a magistrate listens to two villagers dispute a boundary line. There is no dramatic courtroom performance. No theatrical objection. Only patient questioning. Records consulted. Witnesses considered. The magistrate weighs not only facts, but balance. If he rules too harshly, resentment grows. Too leniently, authority weakens. Justice here is not about spectacle. It is about preserving order. Often that means compromise. Often that means neither side leaves entirely satisfied. But both leave contained. And containment is success. At noon, heat presses down on tiled roofs. Work slows. Shadows shorten. In the fields, farmers pause briefly to eat simple meals carried from home. Rice. Vegetables. Perhaps a little preserved fish. Food is not indulgence. It is fuel. Excess is suspicious. Moderation is virtuous. You are not encouraged to stand out through consumption. You are encouraged to remain within rhythm. Even appetite must behave. Meanwhile, along a canal, barges drift steadily, pulled by teams walking the banks. Grain moves toward storage. Taxes move toward cities. The canal itself represents something profound. Coordination. Planning. Collective labor across generations. No single person built it. No single person controls it. Yet it feeds millions. Infrastructure is the quiet spine of civilization. Invisible when functioning. Devastating when broken. As afternoon fades, craftsmen return tools to orderly racks. Scholars capping stones. Soldiers rotate watch shifts. Children are called indoors. Routine closes around the day like a familiar garment. Predictable. Reassuring. Limiting. Safe. All at once. But beneath the surface calm, subtle tensions always exist. A failed harvest in one province. An ambitious official seeking advancement. A whisper of corruption. A rumor of rebellion far away. The empire absorbs these like a vast sea absorbs rain. Small disturbances rarely reach the center. But sometimes they gather. Slowly. Patiently. Until they do. And when they do, history shifts. Not suddenly, but decisively. Dynasties are not eternal. They only feel that way while you stand inside them. Even so, for most living within feudal China, collapse is abstract. What is real is today's responsibility. Today's ritual. Today's obligations. The scale of the empire is too large for daily anxiety. So people focus on what is near. Family. Village. Office. Field. Wall. Shrine. And that focus creates resilience. Not dramatic resilience. But durable resilience. Evening returns once more. Lanterns glow. Stories are told quietly. Not stories of rebellion. Not stories of radical change. But stories of ancestors who endured hardship. Who preserved family honor. Who survived difficult times through patience. Endurance becomes mythology. Patience becomes heroism. Continuity becomes triumph. This is how stability reproduces itself. Through narrative. Through example. Through repetition. And somewhere, perhaps, a young person lies awake longer than the others. Staring at ceiling beams. Imagining something different. A life outside assigned expectations. A path unapproved by tradition. That thought is not new. It has existed in every era. Most of the time, it softens with age. Responsibility reshapes it. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it becomes change. But change here is slow burning. It moves through institutions, not around them. Through reforms, not revolution, at least at first. You, listening from centuries away, may crave climax. A decisive turning point. A dramatic ending. But feudal China offers something quieter. A lesson in scale. In continuity. In how immense systems persist through ordinary days more than extraordinary ones. You would not last a day because your instincts are tuned to acceleration. Here, survival belongs to those tuned to duration. To those who can kneel without humiliation. Wait without despair. Repeat without boredom. Believe without constant validation. Night deepens again. Another cycle closes. Another begins. No trumpet announces it. No chronicler records this particular sunset. Yet it matters. Because history is built from accumulation. From countless unnoticed evenings. From endless patient mornings. And now, after walking beside farmers, clerks, magistrates, merchants, soldiers, scholars, artisans, elders, and dreamers, you understand something subtle. The strength of feudal China was not merely authority. It was rhythm. A rhythm so ingrained that millions moved within it without needing command. A shared tempo of duty. Of restraint. Of inherited meaning. That tempo is foreign to you. But for those who lived inside it, it was simply life. The final lantern dims. Ink dries on unfinished characters. A watchman taps wood in steady intervals as he patrols darkened streets. The sound echoes. Measured. Certain. Unhurried. Like the empire itself. And with that sound fading into distance, we leave it where it has always been. Enduring in memory. Unrushed. Unfolding across centuries. Breathing in. breathing out. While the modern world races elsewhere. Because what feels complete from a distance is, from within, simply another ordinary stretch of days. Rain begins before dawn. Soft at first. Then steady. Courtyards darken. Roofs glisten. Water gathers in stone channels designed generations earlier for this very purpose. Nothing about the rain is dramatic. No one panics. The empire has seen storms before. Children are kept indoors. Farmers adjust schedules. Officials delay travel. Life bends rather than breaks. Flexibility within structure, that is another quiet strength. In a provincial office, sealed reports are opened carefully. Wax softened. Bamboo strips unrolled. The contents are routine. Grain output slightly below expectation. A bridge requiring repair. A local teacher requesting funds. Small problems. Constant problems. Administration is not about eliminating difficulty. It is about managing it continuously. The work never finishes. It only transitions from one task to another. You might find that exhausting. But here, exhaustion is normal. And normal is acceptable. In a modest home, an elderly grandmother instructs a young child in proper greetings. How deeply to bow. When to speak. When to remain silent. These lessons are not written in official texts. They are transmitted through correction. Through repetition. Through gentle scolding. Social order begins at home. By the time a child enters the wider world, hierarchy already feels natural. Not oppressive. Just expected. An expectation shapes behavior more efficiently than force. At midday, incense smoke drifts from a small roadside shrine. Travelers pause briefly. Some bow sincerely. Some mechanically. But they bow. Ritual is less about emotion than participation. You do not always feel reverence. You perform it. And in performing it, you reinforce it. This is how cultures persist. Through action repeated long enough to feel inevitable. In the marketplace, a dispute grows heated. Voices rise. Faces flush. But bystanders intervene quickly. Not out of curiosity, out of preservation. Disorder spreads if left unchecked. So calm is restored swiftly. Harmony is not accidental. It is defended socially. People police themselves and each other long before officials need to step in. This is how vast populations remain governable. Through shared investment in stability. Afternoon passes. Clouds thin. The sun returns, filtered through moisture. Children resume games in narrow alleys. A storyteller gathers a small circle and recounts tales of ancient sages who advised rulers wisely and restrained their own pride. The message is subtle but clear. Wisdom equals restraint. Ambition without balance equals chaos. Stories are instruction disguised as entertainment. And instruction shapes generations. In the distance, construction begins on a repair to a city wall. Brick by brick. Measured. Deliberate. Walls symbolize more than defense. They represent boundary. Identity. Inside and outside. Order and uncertainty. To maintain the wall is to maintain psychological security. Even if no enemy stands nearby. As twilight approaches once more, households prepare evening meals. Simple. Predictable. Comforting. Families gather not to debate philosophy, but to share presence. Conversation remains careful, but warmth exists. Laughter exists. Affection exists. Feudal life is not joyless. It is structured. Within that structure, emotion finds its place. Not explosive. Not theatrical. But steady. And always, beneath the surface of daily routine, time moves. Children grow taller. Officials age. Fields shift with seasons. Rulers eventually die. Successors ascend. The mandate of heaven, whether spoken aloud or silently believed, hovers over every reign. Authority is immense, yet conditional. If disasters multiply. If corruption deepens. If famine spreads unchecked. Whispers begin. Not loudly. Not immediately. But gradually. Even the most rigid system contains the seed of its own transformation. Not because people crave change constantly. But because imbalance accumulates. And balance, eventually, must be restored. You might expect revolution to be chaotic, loud, cinematic. Often, it begins as fatigue. As quiet dissatisfaction. As private comparisons between promise and reality. But for long stretches, decades, sometimes centuries, dissatisfaction never reaches critical mass. Life continues. Harvests return. Taxes are paid. Rituals performed. And the structure holds. Night settles once again. The watchman's wooden clapper echoes at measured intervals. A reminder that someone remains awake while others rest. Security is rarely visible. But it is always present. And in that steady rhythm, you hear the essence of the world you've been visiting. Not excitement. Not constant suffering. But continuity. A civilization so accustomed to its own patterns that they feel as natural as breathing. You would not last a day, not because the world is cruel beyond endurance. But because it requires surrender of certain assumptions. The assumption that you can reinvent yourself at will. That questioning authority is always virtuous. That speed equals progress. That personal fulfillment outranks collective stability. Here, fulfillment is found in fitting well. In aligning cleanly. In sustaining what already exists. That is a different kind of strength. One unfamiliar to a world that celebrates disruption. The final lantern flickers. The rain has stopped. Stone streets glisten beneath moonlight. The empire rests, not fragile, not invincible, but persistent. Layer upon layer of habit, belief, labor, and restraint holding it together. You step back now. Not because the story ends. But because it does not. It continues whether observed or not. Morning will come again. As it has thousands of times before. And long after we leave, the rhythm remains. Slow. Measured. Enduring. Breathing in. Breathing out. Across centuries. And even now, it does not rush. Because rushing is foreign to it. Before the next dawn fully arrives, a bell sounds from a distant temple. Low. Resonant. Unhurried. It is not an alarm. It is a marker. Time here is not sliced into frantic minutes. It is acknowledged in tones, shadows, and habit. People rise not because they are late. But because the day has begun. There is a difference. In the capital, a senior official prepares for court. His robe is layered carefully. Each fold intentional. Rank is visible in fabric, in embroidery, in the small emblem stitched upon his chest. He did not choose these symbols for personal expression. They were earned. Assigned. Recognized by all who see them. Status here is not self-declared. It is granted by structure. And structure decides slowly. Years of examinations. Years of minor posts. Years of demonstrating restraint. Advancement is less about brilliance. More about reliability. In a village far from that ceremony, a blacksmith strikes metal in steady rhythm. Clang. Pause. Clang. Pause. The repetition is almost meditative. Tools must be repaired. Horses must be shod. Blades must hold an edge. His skill is practical. His influence localized. Yet without him, daily life falters. The empire depends not only on philosophy, but on iron. On hands hardened by heat. On trades passed from parent to child without written record. Continuity again. Always continuity. Along a mountain path, a courier moves quickly but not recklessly. A scroll secured at his side. He does not know its full contents. He does not need to. His duty is delivery. Trust in this system is compartmentalized. Everyone carries a piece. Few see the whole. And because each fulfills a narrow responsibility well, the larger machine turns smoothly. You, accustomed to transparency and total information, might feel uneasy. But here, knowledge is layered. Access earned. Restraint expected. Midday light filters through latticed windows in a scholar's study. Brush meets paper with deliberate control. Ink flows into characters formed thousands of times before. Calligraphy is not mere writing. It is discipline made visible. The steadiness of hand reflects steadiness of mind. A single careless stroke reveals inner imbalance. So practice continues. Line after line. Page after page. Self-cultivation is a lifelong process. There is no final mastery. Only refinement. In the countryside, children run beside irrigation channels, laughing freely. Not every moment is solemn. Not every day is heavy. Joy exists in small bursts. Shared fruit. Games played with simple objects. Stories exaggerated for humor. Even within hierarchy, humanity remains playful. Structure frames life. It does not erase it. Yet always, above daily motion, the idea of order hovers like an invisible roof. The emperor may be distant. The court unreachable. But the belief in hierarchy filters downward. Father above son. Elder above youth. Official above villager. Heaven above emperor. A vertical chain linking sky to soil. Break one link carelessly, and the entire pattern trembles. So most choose maintenance over rupture. Stability over experimentation. Predictability over possibility. You might ask. Was no one restless? Of course they were. Restlessness is human. But restlessness here often transforms inward. Into poetry. Into subtle critique hidden in metaphor. Into private reflection rather than public revolt. Expression exists. Just encoded. Careful. Layered. Safety lies in implication. Evening arrives once more, as it always does. A family gathers to repair worn clothing by lamplight. Thread pulled gently through fabric. A tear closed. It is a small act. But it mirrors the larger civilization. Mending rather than discarding. Repair rather than replace. Preserve rather than reinvent. This mindset extends beyond cloth. It shapes governance. Education. Family life. Memory. Somewhere in the empire, a minor official makes a small corrupt decision. A bribe accepted quietly. A favor granted unfairly. Such flaws exist in every system. Perfection is myth. But corruption too must remain measured. If it spreads too far, imbalance grows. If imbalance grows too large, legitimacy erodes. And legitimacy is the invisible foundation of authority. Without belief, power thins. With belief, it solidifies. Night deepens. Stars scatter across a sky unpolluted by electric light. Generations before have looked at the same constellations. Generations after will do the same. Time stretches outward, vast and unhurried. Individuals flicker briefly within it. But the pattern feels continuous. That continuity comforts. Even as lives remain constrained. You stand at the edge of it now. Watching the rhythm. The repetition. The discipline. The quiet pride in fulfilling one's role well. You would not last a day. Not because suffering overwhelms instantly. But because meaning here is defined differently. Not by personal expansion. But by alignment. Not by rapid change. But by sustained balance. It asks you to accept limits without resentment. To honor tradition without irony. To endure without applause. That is a strength modernity rarely trains. And so, once more, the watchman's sound echoes down a narrow street. Wood striking wood. Measured. Certain. The empire does not need spectacle to survive. It needs mornings that resemble yesterday. Officials who perform predictably. Families who transmit custom faithfully. Farmers who trust the seasons. Scholars who revere the past. And millions who accept that stability is a collective achievement. The lanterns dim. The gates close. The wind moves softly through tiled eaves. Feudal China does not end. It does not crescendo. It simply continues. Breathing. Enduring. Layer upon layer of ordinary days forming the vast architecture of history. And as you step away from it once more, you carry only observation. Not obligation. The rhythm fades into distance. But it never truly stops. It simply moves on. Steady as ever. Beyond the horizon of your time. And still, beyond the horizon of your time, the rhythm does not falter. Because for those within it, there is no sense of being inside something historical. There is only life. Another morning unfolds. Mist clings low over riverbanks. Fishermen push narrow boats into slow-moving water. Their nets arc outward in practiced motion. They do not think of empire. They think of current. Of depth. Of where fish tend to gather when the air is cool. The empire exists above them like distant weather. Present. Influential. But not always immediate. Daily survival narrows attention to what hands can reach. In a city courtyard, a young woman embroiders intricate patterns into silk. Her stitches are patient, exact. Each thread pulled through with care. The design is not random. It carries symbols, longevity, harmony, prosperity. Images repeated across generations. Needlework becomes language. Quiet but articulate. Her labor may never enter official history. Yet it shapes culture just as surely as decrees from a throne. Civilization is not only governed. It is crafted. Inside a government archive, documents are stacked in ordered bundles. Dynasty upon dynasty has produced paper trails. Petitions. Judgments. Tax lists. Promotions. Demotions. Records of flood relief. Records of punishments. The weight of memory is physical here. Stored. Categorized. Preserved. The past is not distant. It sits on shelves. Consulted when precedent is needed. Innovation exists, but rarely without reference to what came before. To move forward, one must look backward. At the borderlands, cultural edges blur. Merchants exchange goods from distant regions. Languages overlap. Customs mix carefully. The empire is not a single uniform texture. It contains variation. Dialect shifts. Clothing styles differ. Local traditions persist. Yet above this diversity floats a shared framework of order. The center may be far away, but its influence reaches outward in subtle strands. Through taxation. Through examination systems. Through ritual acknowledgement. Unity here is administrative as much as emotional. A traveling teacher arrives in a remote village. He carries books wrapped in cloth. Children gather curiously. For some, this is the first exposure to formal learning. He speaks of moral conduct, of filial respect, of the proper way to act in a layered society. Education is not merely literacy. It is orientation. Teaching people how to exist within structure. The lessons are clear. Know your place. Fulfill it well. Harmony depends on it. And yet, within that harmony, private ambitions flicker. A farmer hopes his son might pass examinations. A merchant dreams of securing a stronger trade route. A craftsman imagines his work admired in distant markets. Ambition is not absent. It is simply channeled. Allowed paths exist. Stray too far, and resistance meets you. Follow established corridors, and advancement is possible, slowly. Patience remains the currency of aspiration. Afternoon heat returns. Markets thin. Doors close briefly for rest. Silence settles in waves. The pace never accelerates uncontrollably. Life expands and contracts like breath. Expansion in activity. Contraction in reflection. A rhythm that feels almost organic. As if the civilization itself were a living body. Fields its limbs. Cities its organs. Roads its veins. Communication its pulse. And belief its steady heartbeat. Even dissent follows rhythm. When corruption grows obvious. When natural disaster strains resources. When rulers neglect visible duties. Murmurs begin. At first, only in private rooms. Behind closed shutters. Then in tea-houses. Then in letters written cautiously. Change rarely erupts without warning. It gathers like distant thunder. But until lightning strikes, daily life continues. Most citizens focus on survival, not speculation. Because survival is immediate. Dynastic fate feels abstract. Evening arrives yet again. Lantern light flickers against carved wood. A father recounts family lineage to attentive children. Names repeated like sacred verses. Memory passed orally and ritually. In remembering ancestors, people locate themselves. Not as isolated individuals. But as continuations. That continuity reduces fear. You are part of something older. Something tested. Something that has endured hardship before. And so you will endure too. You, accustomed to personal reinvention, might feel confined. But for them, continuity offers reassurance. Limits create clarity. Clarity reduces anxiety. When roles are defined, decisions narrow. When decisions narrow, doubt softens. Freedom expands possibility. But it also expands uncertainty. Feudal life trades breadth for stability. And stability, though restrictive, can feel safe. Night deepens for the 1000th time in this journey. Stars remain steady. The same constellations guiding travelers, inspiring poets, marking seasons. Heaven above. Earth below. Humanity in between. A vertical balance that defines worldview. Disturb the harmony between those layers. And suffering follows. Maintain it. And prosperity lingers. At least, that is the belief. And belief shapes reality more powerfully than force alone. So we arrive again at the quiet edge. Not an ending. Because there is no single ending. Dynasties will eventually shift. Structures will strain. External forces will press harder. Internal weaknesses will widen. But that belongs to another era. Another long unfolding. For now, the empire still breathes in its familiar cadence. Measured. Layered. Persistent. You have walked its roads without dust on your feet. Heard its rituals without kneeling. Observed its hierarchy without bowing. And perhaps now you understand. It was not constant spectacle that defined this world. It was repetition. Expectation. Alignment. A civilization built less on explosive moments. And more on millions of ordinary days performed correctly. That is harder than it sounds. And rarer than modern eyes recognize. The final watchman's call fades once more into the distance. Wood tapping wood. Time marked without hurry. Another cycle complete. Another ready to begin. The empire does not ask whether you approve.